Thank you for joining us for this special episode of our poetry channel. My name is Helen Zhang. I'm the Wellspring Associate Professor of Comparative Literature at the University of Tulsa in the United States. I've chosen Kafka's letter to his father as a contribution to Letters Live. As a university professor, I can see Kafka's angst of self-discovery and his effort to prove his spiritual existence play out in my students. Kafka so beautifully puts these concerns into words. I believe many will find solace in his letter and perhaps also a hint to the solution to their own issues. 4 of my student interlocutors will join me in reading excerpts from this letter in my English translation. Together, we will review the full spectrum of emotions and sentiments. November 1919. Dearest Father, you once asked why I assert that I'm afraid of you. I was, like always, unable to answer you, partly because of that very fear of you, partly because my justification for this fear would require more details than I could keep straight while talking. And now, as I attempt to answer you in writing, still it will be very incomplete because even in writing, this fear and what it engenders hold me back from you, and because the magnitude of the subject far exceeds my memory and reason.
As to my writing, and unknown to you what clung to it, you hit closer to home with your aversion. Here, in fact, I got a distance away from you on my own, even if it called to mind the worm which, when stamped on its tail end by a foot, tears away its front half and drags itself aside. I was somewhat safe. There was a gasp of relief. The aversion that you naturally and quickly also displayed toward my writing was now, for once, welcome to me. My vanity, my ambition, did suffer from your greeting to my books, greeting that had become proverbial to us. Put it on my nightstand. Often you were playing cards as the book arrived. But after all, I was actually fine with it. Not only because of rebellious malice, not only because of joy over new proof of my view of our relationship, but rather because at its core, that formula sounded to me like, now you are free. Naturally, it was an illusion. I was not free, or most optimistically speaking, not yet free. My writing treated of you. There I bemoaned only what I could not bemoan upon your breast. It was a deliberately drawn out farewell to you, one that, although compelled by you, ran nevertheless in the direction determined by me. But how little all this added up to. It is worth mentioning only because it happened in my life. Elsewhere it would not even be noted. And yet also because it dominated. In childhood as inkling, later as hope, later still, often as hopelessness. My life, and dictated, if you will, still in your figure, my few small decisions.
The choice of my occupation, for instance. I've had, for as long as I can remember, such incredibly deep anxieties of claiming my spiritual existence that I was indifferent to all else. Jewish students in our high schools are often peculiar. Here one finds the most improbable. But my cold, beastly complacent, childishly helpless, hardly veiled, indestructible indifference ad ridiculum, the indifference of a self-satisfyingly yet coldly imaginative child, I've never again found outside of myself. And yet, it was also the sole protection against the destruction of my nerves by angst and consciousness of guilt. Only the anxieties about myself occupied me, this, however, in different ways. The anxiety is about my health, for instance. It began imperceptibly. increased by innumerable degrees, and finally ended in real sickness. What's all this? Not actual bodily sickness. But since I was doubtful of everything, demanding from every moment a new proof of my being, and nothing was in my actual, indubitable, sole, unequivocally self-determined possession, truly a disinherited son, naturally even the most intimate, one's own body, became doubtful to me. You know, my overall work achievement, both at the office where, however, sloth is not particularly noticeable, and mine is kept in bounds by fear anyway, and at home is negligible. Should you have overview of it, you would be appalled. But maybe, inherently I was not slothful at all, but there was nothing left for me to do. There where I lived, I was cast out, pronounced guilty, vanquished. To flee elsewhere, I exerted myself utterly. But it wasn't work, for it was something impossible, something that, for my powers, with small exception, was unattainable.
This was the state in which I gained the freedom to choose my occupation. Was I, however, still able at all to make actual use of such freedom? Had I still any trust in my abilities to attain a real occupation? My self-assessment was much more dependent on you than on anything else, such as a superficial success. That was the strengthening of an instant, otherwise nothing. But on the other side, your weight always pulled down much more strongly. Never, I thought, would I pass the first grade of elementary school. But I succeeded. I even received a prize. But the entrance exam for high school I surely would not pass. But I succeeded. But now, I'm certainly failing in the first grade of high school. No, I did not fail, and I succeeded on and on. From this, however, no confidence arose. On the contrary, I was always convinced, and in your dismissive mien I positively had the proof of this, that the more I succeed, the worse it ultimately will have to end. Often in my mind I saw the frightful assembly of professors. High school is only the most unified example, yet all around me it was similar. How they would convene when I had passed the first class of high school, hence in the second, when I had passed the second class, hence in the third, and so forth, in order to investigate this unique, scandalous case. How I, the most incompetent, and in any case the most unenlightened of all, had succeeded in sneaking up to this class, which, now that everybody's attention was turned to me, would naturally spit me out right away. To the jubilation of all the legitimate, freed from this nightmare.
To live with such imaginations is not easy for a child. What, under these circumstances, did I care about the lesson? Who was able to strike a spark of interest in me? I was interested in the lesson, not only the lesson, but everything around me at this crucial age, as much as a bank embezzler who, still in position, trembles at every thought of discovery, is interested in the small amount of business that he still has to handle as a bank clerk. So small, so distant everything was in comparison to the main issue. It then proceeded to the final exam, which I really passed only through cheating, and then everything stopped. Now I was free. If even in spite of the pressure of high school I had been concentrating only on myself, how much more so now, as at last I was free. Hence, I had no actual freedom to choose my occupation. I knew, to everything but the main issue, I will be just as indifferent as to all the subjects taught in high school. Hence, it is a matter of finding a job which, without injuring my vanity too much, most easily affords this indifference. Hence, law was the obvious choice. Little contrary attempts of my vanity, my hope, such as a fortnight's study of chemistry or a half-year study of German, only reinforced that fundamental conviction. Hence, I studied law. This meant that in the few months before the exams, my nerves frayed. I nourished my spirit virtually on wood dust, which, besides, had already been masticated for me by thousands of mouths. But in a sense, this was exactly to my taste, just as in a sense, earlier my high school and later my clerk job, for they all perfectly suited my situation. In any case, here I showed astonishing foresight. Regarding my studies and my job, even as a small child I already had fairly clear inklings. From here I expected no rescue. Here I had long since given up.
So, obviously, things in reality cannot fit together as neatly as the pieces of evidence in my letter. Life is more than a puzzle. But with the correction made by this rejoinder, a correction I'm neither able nor willing to elaborate upon, in my view, something has been achieved nevertheless, which so closely approximates the truth that it can soothe us both a little and make easier our living and dying.